Millions of tons of hazardous materials are transported by trucks, trains, planes, ships, and pipelines to facilities throughout the country every day. While this is essential to keep our economy running, over the years, terrorist incidents have taught us that we need to protect ourselves from any potential for attack. And hazardous materials can be, and have been, used as weapons. In this program, we'll discuss how the HAZMAT regulations established by the Department of Transportation can prevent dangerous substances from falling into the wrong hands when they are being handled or transported. We'll examine what security risks exist while handling and transporting hazardous materials, how to recognize and eliminate potential security threats, and what actions you should take during a security breach or attack on your facility. To help protect the United States from future terrorist attacks using hazardous materials, the Department of Transportation requires companies that transport or cause the transportation of these materials to provide security awareness training to their HAZMAT employees. This includes everyone involved in the transportation of hazardous materials, from the manufacturing and testing of HAZMAT shipping containers to the unloading of the materials at their final destination. This training is critical because you and your co-workers may be the first line of defense in preventing this type of attack. Years ago, terrorists tended to rely on conventional military weapons, but today they have added hazardous materials to their arsenals. The reason for this is that many types of hazmats are readily available and possess the ability to cause major damage and inflict mass casualties. But who should we be on the lookout for? It is important to remember that terrorists can have many faces. They may be members of a highly trained foreign cell, a domestic paramilitary organization, or misguided individuals with their own twisted agendas. In many ways, terrorists are like any other type of criminal. So some of the same precautions that we'd use to safeguard consumer goods will also work with hazardous materials. Since internal threats can often be the most dangerous, effective security requires an examination of a facility from the inside out. A misguided worker can pose an extremely serious threat. Employees have knowledge of their facility's layout and security procedures, and may even have access to sensitive areas. Internal security is an ongoing process that starts with background checks being performed before an employee is hired. Typical internal security measures also include conducting spot checks of personal vehicles and lockers, having visitors show identification and sign in, and accompanying visitors while they are at the facility. If your facility uses other companies to transport hazardous materials, the security measures that they have in place should also be checked regularly. You have to be aware of the potential for unintentional security breaches as well. They can frequently provide terrorists with information that is useful to their plots. Terrorists can intercept emails, so confidential information shouldn't be sent over any computer network, hardwired or wireless, unless the message has been encrypted first. Files that detail your company's security measures should only be stored on computers that are protected by firewalls. You shouldn't discuss sensitive information on smart or cell phones, tablets, or other wireless devices either, because it's possible for a terrorist to intercept those signals and eavesdrop on your conversation electronically. Avoid discussing security measures via text messages or on social media sites as well. And never discuss the hazardous materials that are handled at your facility or your facility's security measures in public. You never know who might be listening. To do your part with regard to hazmat security, You need to know what hazardous materials are stored at and transported to and from your facility. You should also know which of these substances could be used as weapons. Potentially dangerous hazmats include flammables, explosives, corrosives, and reactive substances, as well as materials that are toxic to people or the environment. If your company handles biological materials or infectious waste, you will also need to determine if these substances could be weaponized. The DOT Emergency Response Guidebook is an invaluable resource regarding the characteristics and hazards of all these materials. Refer to the green section of the guide to learn what types of damage one of these substances could do. Once you recognize which hazardous materials in your facility could be targeted by terrorists, the next thing to look at is how a security breach or attack could be made. Protecting a facility from terrorism is much easier than protecting individual hazmat shipments. Barriers like fencing and deterrents such as bright lights, security cameras, and alarm systems can do a lot to prevent unauthorized access. If possible, entry to a facility should be through a single, well-guarded access way. Parking for visitors should be located well away from hazardous material storage areas. Of course, barriers and other deterrents are useless if someone leaves a gate open or fails to set an alarm. To keep unauthorized people out of the facility, employees should always follow good security practices. In addition to controlling access to a facility, the hazardous materials that are on site must be secured as well. All hazardous materials should be locked in storage rooms, fenced-in areas, or separate high-security buildings. Valves on tanks and storage vats should be secured as well. Using a sign-out system for keys to restricted areas and performing frequent inspections to make sure that no one has tampered with locks or other security equipment can also help to keep everything safe and sound. Hazardous materials are most vulnerable to theft and sabotage while they are being transported. But there are ways to reduce this risk even before a shipment leaves a facility. For example, it's better to schedule several smaller deliveries of hazardous materials than one big one. This limits the quantity that could be stolen at any one time. It also reduces the likelihood that a single shipment could be used as a weapon of mass destruction. However, terrorists may steal smaller shipments and stockpile them to carry out a future attack. So even small amounts of missing hazmats must be reported to the police. Sometimes a number of reports about small thefts can help authorities see the big picture and enable them to foil a terrorist plot. Terrorists may also try to purchase hazmats legally, so everyone from the person taking an order to the driver delivering the shipment needs to be aware of who is receiving the hazardous materials and what the materials are being used for. Pay special attention to new customers. It's a warning sign if they lack knowledge about the proper use of a material, refuse to sign for a shipment or to show a photo ID, or offer cash payment or a bribe to obtain delivery of a shipment. Also watch out for deliveries to unusual locations, last-minute shipments that require rush processing, and apparent stockpiles of other hazmat shipments, particularly when the materials that have been gathered are not normally used together. If there are any concerns that someone may use hazardous materials to carry out an attack, contact law enforcement personnel immediately. Before leaving a facility, drivers should perform a pre-trip inspection to make sure that everything is secure. Trailer doors should be locked to prevent the theft or sabotage of the hazardous materials they are transporting. It's also a good idea to use security seals on truck doors so that it's easy to see if anybody has tried to tamper with the load. Hazardous materials that are transported in a vehicle with an open bed should be physically secured. Although hazardous materials are transported by many different types of vehicles, most shipments are made by truck. Many of the security precautions that should be taken will be the same whether it's for a big rig or a small van. Once hazardous materials are on the road, the driver becomes responsible for maintaining the security of the shipment. HAZMAT drivers should check in with their dispatcher frequently to inform them of any delays, detours, or stops that need to be made. But they should never discuss details about the load or the route they are taking over a CB radio or wireless devices such as cell phones and tablets. Remember, terrorists may be eavesdropping. The route that a shipment takes should be as short as possible, but if regular deliveries are made to the same facility, a driver should vary the roads they take to get there and the times when the deliveries arrive. This will make it harder for someone to plan a hijacking. A parked vehicle is more vulnerable to hijacking, sabotage, and cargo theft than a moving target. So drivers need to be particularly cautious when they are stopping at fueling stations, restaurants, and rest areas. Trucks should never be parked in remote locations. At night, park in areas that are well lit. Drivers should lock their vehicles whenever they leave them, and keep an eye out for anyone fiddling with the vehicle or the load. A quick inspection of the vehicle and the cargo should be performed before the driver gets going again, to make sure nothing has been tampered with. If a driver is being followed, they should call 911 immediately and give their location. Stay off of back roads until help arrives. Give themselves room to maneuver so that they can't be sandwiched and trapped between other vehicles. Once hazardous materials arrive at their destination, the workers unloading them are responsible for making sure that the shipment is not a threat to their facility. The security procedures they perform are especially important when the materials that are being delivered are transported by another company. If the shipment is not expected, both the carrier that delivered them and the shipper themselves should be contacted immediately to verify that the shipment is legitimate. Before a shipment is unloaded, its shipping papers must be checked. The vehicle and its cargo should be thoroughly inspected, and the containers should be closely examined for signs of damage or tampering. Workers should also watch for containers that look unusual, are improperly labeled, or don't match the description in the shipping papers. Special attention should be given to shipments that enter the United States from other countries, since there may not have been much security at their points of origin. If a container is questionable or damaged in any way, it should be refused. Report any evidence of tampering or theft to management so that they can contact law enforcement. Warehouse doors should be closed immediately after a shipment has been unloaded. Remember, keeping terrorists locked out is one of the simplest and most effective ways to protect hazmats throughout the transportation process. As we've seen, we can help disarm terrorists and prevent destruction and loss of life by following good security practices when handling and transporting hazardous materials. Let's review. Be aware of any hazmats that your company stores, handles, or transports. Make sure that hazardous materials are secured at all times. Inspect all incoming hazmats and refuse any suspicious or damaged containers. Plan deliveries to minimize opportunities for theft, hijacking, or sabotage. Never discuss your company's security procedures or the hazardous materials that you handle in public, via wireless devices, or over unsecured networks. The next time they strike, terrorists could try to use hazardous materials against us. But by understanding the threat, following hazmat security procedures, and reporting suspicious situations, you can help to protect yourself, your coworkers, and everyone in the community from an attack.